Well, good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to the next week of the newfound virtual market mission. Welcome to all of the attendees that are joining us, either whether you're in the UK, whether you're in New Zealand, possibly even India or Sweden. And welcome to another week of fantastic and very insightful discussions with the genuine experts of the banking and finance and fintech community. We're in for a really exciting week. I hope, like me, you enjoyed last week's sessions as much as I did. I just was so impressed with the level of content, the quality of the speakers, and the genuine insights that we gleaned last week, whether it be from government support, regulation, or insights across where things are going with things like open banking and RegTech and so on. This week, we're going to get into a lot of detail about growing your commercial strategy and how you are going to engage with the financial services sector and other business sectors here in Australia. Just remember, we're not just talking about banks, we're talking about the whole financial services sector, but also technology companies as well. We really have a great lineup of speakers. Tonight is a little shorter than we had last week, but I think the quality has just stepped up again because I've met many of the speakers that are on this first session, some of them old friends of mine and some of them new friends. And they really have got a lot of scar tissue, which they want to talk to you about and share insights with. I know you're going to get a lot out of it today. So most importantly, and as we did last week, really get engaged, really ask those questions through the chat function. You can use the chat function. And then as we get towards the end of the panel discussion, we actually invite you to get online and ask questions of our panel members because they're so keen to talk to you. They really do want to help. That's why they're doing this, because they want to see you succeed, which is what this whole market mission is all about. So what I'm going to do is now introduce you to Gemma Cosgrove, who's the National Head of Partnerships at Stone & Chalk. Gemma has worked with so many fintechs and on the fintech side herself for many years, has got great experience. She's worked out a number of questions for our panel today, but as I say, we really want you to get involved later on, particularly and start asking questions. Gemma, welcome aboard. And are you excited about today's panel?
Thanks, Andrew. I'm just so pleased and so stoked to be moderating this discussion. It's definitely an area I'm really passionate about, both with my past experience, but also my current role at Stone & Chalk now. So yeah, thank you for having me. Great.
Introduce the panel, please.
Thank you. So I absolutely support your message there. We have a wealth of experience with us today. I'd like to introduce you all to Simone Guiraud, Head of Consumer Portfolio at X Ventures Commonwealth Bank of Australia. We'd also like to introduce you to David Ostberg. He is Head of Operations and Delivery at Zienta. Patrick or Paddy Crooks, he's Executive Chair at Fusion Labs. Ian Rolfe, Country Managing Director at C2FO ANZ, and Hermia Leong, Associate Director Investments at NAB Ventures. If I could ask if you could please say a few words about yourself by way of introduction. Shall I start with you, Simon? Simone.
Yeah, sure. So sorry, I'm not able to turn on the video, but hopefully this will be solved later. My name is Simon. I'm leading the consumer venture portfolio team for X15 Venture. X15 Venture is a Commonwealth Bank of Australia venture building vehicle. And basically its mission, its purpose is really to build the next generation of innovative digital services with the innovation community. So we're looking at lots of entrepreneurs, but we're building this also with a strategic partner like KPMG High Growth Venture or Microsoft. And basically my role here is to identify customer-facing early stage opportunities and build the case for the Innovation Investment Committee to take them forward.
Thank you, Simone. Great to have you. David.
Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you, Gemma and Andrew, for the intro. I come with, I guess, many years of technology consulting, sales, delivery and operations background, mainly, well, entirely here in Australia, New Zealand, and primarily up on the east coast of Australia. So it's good to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. Patrick?
Hi, I'm Patrick Crooks. So I came to Australia 20 years ago on the back of a financial services startup. got a few of the scars at that stage. So I know what you're going to be going through. Luckily, things have changed over those years. I've also worked around the world on just different fintechs. And at the moment, I'm with Fusion Labs, and we really advise corporates on how to deal with innovation internally, as well as open innovation. So how to just bridge that gap between startups and corporates. So thanks for having us. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Patty. Ian?
Hi everyone, very nice to be on this Zoom. So I'm currently looking after C2FO Australia. By way of an explanation, that's a fintech in a hypergrowth mode, just trying to get to scale. But before that, lots of experience in and out of the banking sector, some good meetings, some not so good meetings, and I'm looking forward to sharing all of that with you.
Thank you, Ian. And last but definitely not least, Hermia.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all virtually. My name's Hermia. I am on the investments team at NAB Ventures. NAB Ventures is the venture capital arm of NAB, National Australia Bank. And we were established a couple of years ago, about 4 to 5 years ago, essentially to bring innovation into the bank. And so we make equity investments in companies that we think are strategic to the bank, essentially, and that's our investment mandate.
Brilliant, thank you. And thank you all so much for being part of this discussion. We clearly have some amazing experience, perspectives, and such diversity of thought and background here, which is the way that we can really provide the most useful and helpful insights to these companies looking to Australia as potential customers in the future. So let's kick off. Let's talk about the Australian market as prospective customers for these up and coming companies from the UK. Given your experience and perspective on corporate innovation, we've got venturing, investment, collaboration, partnership. How do you see the market presenting itself to companies like those who are part of this mission and actually approaching our Australian market? I'd like to perhaps start with Hermia. I know that you've worked in the UK for a few years of your career as well, so it'd be really interesting to kick off with you.
Yeah, I mean, fintech is really one of the areas that we, and I can say this quite generally, but we Australia do look to the UK, especially with our open banking, sort of regulations coming in. We do look to the UK and other markets for inspiration, and we do see, UK companies coming in, especially fintech companies, trying to sort of help Australian customers, including NAB. I think the market is ripe. So for UK companies, this is a great time to come in. Australia is very receptive to international innovation.
Great, thank you. And Ian, I know you've spent some time in the UK as well.
I have indeed, yep, and it was certainly a fun place. But look, I'm going to differ a little bit there. Australia is, reasonably open to innovations coming in, but there's also like a little bit of a not built here culture that kind of permeates the middle layer of everyone that you'll talk to. So both open, but at the same time a little bit closed off. So I promised earlier on our briefing call that I'd be honest and share those experiences. So just call me up when I go too far, Gemma.
Will do. Thank you, Ian. We want the honesty, and these companies will benefit from that honesty. So thank you very much. David, what are your thoughts on the Australian market?
Yeah, look, I actually think it's really interesting. I mean, Hermia made a really good point that Australia looks to the UK, and I'd also say the US. I somewhat disparagingly sometimes say that we're about 5 years behind of both of those markets. It's maybe not so bad as it used to be. And then picking up on Ian's point, I think we have actively changed, we're actively more receptive to wanting to partner with companies from overseas, but there is still, as you said, Ian, a kind of a lingering, a lingering doubt in some people's minds. But I think the dial's shifting. If I were to be positive about it, I think where we were 10 years ago, diabolical, but I think we are shifting. And so if you were to be upbeat, you might say that you're getting on the wave at the right time, which either means you're going to get a good ride or you're going to get dumped. We'll soon see. That would be my perspective.
Great, thanks, David. What about you, Simon? You are part of an organisation who has come together, yes, part of an existing bank, but a new department and an arm to that bank, and functioning at arm's length, you could say. Tell us what your perspectives are.
Yeah, so it's quite interesting. As you can hear, I come from Europe and spent a couple of years in London too. Yes, I would say the main difference that I'm seeing here from either Europe or the UK and Australia is the level of and the quality of digital experiences by banks here. If you're looking at the big four banks here, because they didn't really go through a proper GFC, and banking being a pro-cyclical market, they've been able to reinvest in innovation and digital capability much more than in the UK or Europe, which means that today you're looking at digital banking apps that are basically like top 5, top 10 in the world, making it really hard for certain model like neobanks to flourish here in Australia versus the UK. I would say that it's not really like for like, and we've seen lots of UK players not making it here in Australia because they were not adjusting their model. I'm thinking Purple Bricks that spent 2 years here and came back home to the UK. So definitely an environment open for innovation, but quite competitive because of the concentration of the market with the big four that invest heavily in innovation.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And finally, what are your thoughts, Paddy? You've got such diversity in the experience you've had from both sides here, and tell us what you see and what you think.
So look, I'm going to just hit back a bit on Ian's point. So that not invented yet thing, 100% agree with it. Look, I came to, but I'll give you a reason why I think. I mean, I came to Australia, I was amazed, like, so Australia is one of the biggest gambling countries in the world. Like the guys just love gambling on anything. I live down in Melbourne, it's even worse. And yet like there's this massive risk aversion. And it's like quite clear. So when you come here, there's people do want to tick every box and make sure that things are working before they let it loose. And so if you're sitting on the side of a bank or any big company, it's actually really hard you've got the startup risk of someone coming into your market. You got this sort of technology that you've got to get your head around with all of the associated security risks, etc. And then you're also unsure whether these blokes or people or whoever are going to hang around the country for too long. And so I found when I came into Australia, there were a few things that you had to do to sort of overcome that not invented yet syndrome. The one was have reference sites that people really understand. We hired an advisory board of people that were really, really well trusted in the market. And then like one of the things I learned was send in your A team, like, so bring across some good people and make them live here. And we also invested heavily. So we put in some capital into the market. I think those kind of things help signal to our customers. Yeah, there's a few other things, just quickly, just finding someone who's really hurting. So we found a second tier business who was going to die if we didn't come and fix the blood on the floor and patch them up. And that always helps as well. So, and learning a bit about sport. Yeah, beyond cricket. Yeah, and you're in, yeah.
Well, gets you a little bit across the gambling space too, right? So try to encourage some
that's
more.
right. Well, that's
taking some bets, absolutely. I might stick with you on that point, Patrick, because I mean, there's this. I mean, you've just talked about two different approaches or perspectives and behaviours that you might see in, say, individuals. But is it actually translating into the well-established organisation? How receptive would you say that financial services and even the adjacent or relevant industries might actually be to new ways to solve the business or customer problems that exist for them?
Look, I mean, it's chalk and cheese over the last 10 years. I mean, you mentioned a paper that I'd done. It was a few years ago. I think some of the fundamentals remain, but attitudinally, people really want to get this right. But structurally, it's just bloody difficult. And I'll never forget having lunch with the CIO of Combank, one of the biggest banks here. And I'd just done something on how to overcome fear of failure in large organizations. And he goes, Paddy, brilliant work. You didn't have the regulators like phoning you first thing this morning to have a chat. And I mean, literally when they wake up, that's the first thing you're worried about. It's not stuffing up your financial services license. And then everything else rolls from there. But I think people are quite interested. I think we've got to just watch the difference between interest and following through and writing out checks as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a good point, you know, heavily regulated financial services industry and many other industries here in Australia. Ian, what's your perspective on how receptive these companies might be?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that all of it is true and none of it is true. And what I mean by that is, you know, the market is quite large. It's able to sustain both for example, very advanced banking infrastructure at a consumer level. But the truth is, in my sector where I am, there's nothing there. So, you know, there's truth on both sides of that equation, and it's equally true of what Patty said about the regulator. You know, a lot of people are absolutely focused on compliance and regulation, but then there are entire areas that are non-regulated at all, and the regulations are following, in many cases, the rest of the world, but are a long way behind. So, you know, it's not one answer; it's multiple answers. Is kind of the first thing I'd say to that. But also, the associated organisations provide a lot of opportunities, and I think we kind of hinted at that just before, and you did in your question. But there's, and maybe we'll talk about this in a little bit more depth, but there's a whole lot of peripheral organizations around the pure banking sector. And those range from finance kind of super funds through to second tiers. But there's also technology, there's IT, and most importantly, there's telco. Telco here is very strong and it's heavy in financial services. But then there's other peripherally related financial organizations that might be overlooked, and those are things like cab charge, the taxi owners who are very large in financial services, believe it or not. Australia Post, who's desperate to get into the industry. Well, who else can I think of? There's like the FPOST organization, who are being toasted by MasterCard and Visa at the moment. So there's not just kind of, you know, the traditionals, but there's also interrelated financial organizations that have been in the core of the system and are being pushed out. So you can kind of imagine that as multiple paths into the sector. And the real trick here is to find the things that are the optimum amount of regulation, the optimum amount of competition, and the optimum partnership and customer growth.
Yeah, fine balancing act, so that is required to have quite a deep understanding as to which players are playing where and how constrained they might be through regulation or competition or other activities. So let's talk a little bit about how a company might actually look to present a compelling case to provide the right solutions for what an organization actually needs, rather than potentially what they might say they want or what they say they need. How should these startups or scale-ups be looking to approach large enterprise customers to actually get that across? David, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important, and this will sound like sales 101, right? But the frame of reference is really important to understand for any customer you're going into. And I think coming back to the point we said earlier, where we look to the UK, the experiences that we've got down here won't mirror exactly what's in the UK and vice versa. So I think it's worth, particularly with cutting edge technology, my experience is to understand the frame of reference that the person you're talking to has. What assumptions are they making about the partnership or the solution you're proposing based on what they know? Because they will make a bunch of assumptions and not actually articulate this to you unless you draw it out. And so, again, it sounds a bit like sales 101, but particularly with some of the, the new fintech, and the proposals coming through, it's even more important to really understand what they're asking for may not be what they need, because they're coming at it from a different frame of reference to what you are. So I guess it's all about talking and understanding, what do they actually need, not what they're necessarily asking for.
Really good points. And it goes back to that old example of did anyone actually ask for the iPhone before it was invented? A really common example used. But let's jump over to the ventures and investment sides of big banks. Hermia, Simon, what do you think about this, and how should these companies approach the likes of your teams where you are dedicated to focusing on identifying these new solutions?
I can quickly jump in first. So ventures, if there is a venture arm, and you know, I am part of one of those, they're a really good sort of entry point to the bank. But having said that, it, you know, big like NAB is, you know, 30,000 people. I would recommend going to, you know, the actual end user as well. Multiple points of attack is the best way to get into a enterprise sort of bank customer. The other thing that we really like to see is there a bank use case already? So if you have, you know, bank clients in Europe or US or wherever, please tell us about it. We love hearing, you know, about when that particular product has been rolled out with other bank clients, and that makes a really strong case.
Yeah, just to build on this, and really good points from Hermia. I think it also depends from the type of fintech we're talking about. Are you looking at securing banks as clients, or are you trying to develop new customer-facing proposition with this bank? I think the first thing is to understand is what kind of engagement really are you after? Is this a simple, you know, vendor agreement? Are you more into a strategic partnership? Are you in a more straightforward distribution partnership? Because depending on the type of engagement, the type of stakeholders that you need, and the level of the stakeholders will be different. If I take an example, if you want a strategic partnership, you need to make sure you go a few rounds below a CEO. If it's a vendor agreement, you'll deal with the procurement team. So I think that's one thing. More like in customer-facing opportunities, which I see a lot is, and to refer to David's comment, I hear a lot of people telling me about the features, about the tech and so on, without articulating the benefits to the bank and making a case for what is a burning platform for the bank to act right now and not delay this to a couple of years, because like we receive like hundreds and hundreds of applications. So how do you get cut through and say, no, you need to act now, because otherwise you're losing strategic value by delaying this kind of choices.
Yeah, and I mean, it leads me to think about, to your point, Hermia, as well as your role, Simon, and the teams that you have are, I suppose, clearer avenues for some fintechs to approach from a venturing or investment perspective. But how do we actually start to provide insight or support to help these companies work out who the right teams and individuals are from these organizations? Or taking a step back further again and actually identifying which organizations might be the right perspectives. Ian, you know, you've talked a lot about the fact that it's beyond just financial services. There are many other companies outside of just the big four banks. How do we support the fintechs in identifying these?
Yeah, so I mean, you can make an active assumption that almost every large corporate, particularly the listed 100 or the biggest 100, they all have their own version of these venture programs, whether they call it a venture program or whether they've got somebody that's an innovation officer or what have you. You know, sometimes getting the attention of the bank's teams takes a customer or a real use case. So, you know, you can use those avenues to get in. There's lots of avenues, but also, you know, you can sell BN business, meaning you can sell something in the UK and get an installation in Australia. And I think that goes to the earlier point about good reference sites. I've seen a lot of companies do that very successfully. And more importantly to me, you know, before you kind of start selling direct, engage the market. And what I mean by engage the market is understand the market. It's complicated, you know, it's got its own nuances. It's very relational, you know, so take the time not to understand just the corporate and who you're going to target or which innovation program you're going to target or which customer you want to target, but understand how the relationship map in that particular subsector works. You know, if you're going to go into oil and gas and you're hiring somebody in Sydney or Melbourne, that's probably not a great location because their relationship map won't work, right? So there's a lot of different avenues here. The good news is that everyone's open for the conversation, and I've found that honesty is the best policy. So sometimes when you say, look, I don't know who to talk to, can you help me? People will actually help you. Whereas if you come across and you're like, well, we've got this great product and we want to tell you about it and we're going to show you how great we are, and the implication is, well, you're not because you don't have it yet, that's less effective. So, you know, there's that aspect as well.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Really good points. And I think, you know, those people who have actually dialed in to listen to your advice, that's really helpful. And relationships, you know, that old saying again, you know, it's not what you know, but who you know, it really does ring true in many of these opportunities that are presented. All right, let's talk a little bit, I suppose, a little bit less positive. And while it's really important to focus on both the promising approaches and things that might work, it's really important for us to understand and share some of the challenges that we've all seen and experienced. Perhaps we've even been part of causing those challenges from different positions in organizations. But what are the challenges that are likely to be faced when trying to partner with established players, particularly in our Australian culture? What sort of mistakes should we be watching out for? Now, Patrick, I know you've written a paper on, I think it was titled, How to Break into a Bank. What were your findings on this?
Yeah, so I mean, the background to that was I came back from overseas. I was all loaded up with great new ideas. And had built some mobile banking stuff overseas and tried to bring it to Australia. And I mean, just speaking to people, there was just no chance in hell. I actually had some people crying in front of me working for a large bank. The lady crying and saying, good luck getting this. Yeah, we know this is the future, but I'm just hitting my head against the wall. Look, I mean, you know, I then went and like tried to work out what the problem is. And I have to say, you've got to empathize on both sides of this. So on the startup side, you're going to like hit 1 million meetings to make a sale. I mean, it's just ridiculous because everyone's going to like just pump you down to the next thing. And as you think you're about on the line, they're going to push you somewhere else. The processes around procurement, etc., people still just really battle with that. And then the whole time you're busy burning capital, especially when you're coming in from overseas. Like there's a high burn rate there that I don't think people really have that empathy for you. Sometimes there's corporate restructurings that happen halfway through a deal and you got to start again. People are scared of IP theft, so are people just like trying to learn about my technology? And so you get a lot of tire kicking. So my sort of antidote to that was, you know, I came here, as I said, in 2000, and I'd met with a lot of different businesses. And over Christmas time, I was going through my notebook and looking at all the meetings and all the promises that had been made by companies, going like, this is really great. I'll see you next week. I'll see you next week. And if you'll forgive me, I had a pee or get off the pot idea, which was literally, in January, I was just like, I can't waste time like this. And to get back to Ian's point of being honest, you know, I went and sat with my customers. I sort of had this idea that if a customer was interested, they wouldn't be offended if I told them I'd met with them like 30 times and hadn't progressed anything, and asked them like the shortest way to actually get stuff done. And if they weren't interested, they might be offended, but then who cares? And so, yeah, so I actually went and had that exact conversation with a whole bunch of people. So I think being open around just that, the cadence of, or the pathway to getting you there. I mean, on the other side, you've got, what I found was the corporates. I mean, it's quite pretty tough because if you buy something that's off the shelf or whatever, half the work's been done with you, the more reference sites there are or more of your competitors using something, the more you can sleep at night. And so you've got these people that they're dealing with an unknown quantity. And so the best way that you can de-risk it, like what I would do is sit down and go, what are all the risks that they're going to look at when they look at my opportunity? And that's around security. Have you got if you've had an external audit done, pen testing, whatever, show the people that. Definitely finding the blood on the floor, like find something that someone really, really needs to get fixed. If not, I mean, the growth, that's more for the internal stuff. So if someone's had a regulatory scare, that's a great place to go and talk to them about how to fix their fraud detection or whatever the case is. If it's growth, go to X15 guys. Start with small proof of concepts. Sometimes, but again, just make sure that there's a pathway to buying and that they aren't just kicking the tires. And then the other thing is to try and find something that's contained within one team. So you don't want to go like a whole organizational whatever too early on. You want it so that it's under a span of control, so that one person can make a call and take moderate risk. So it's just de-risking, I think, yeah. But I think it's improved over time, but not to the point that we'd have liked to have it improved, yeah.
Agree. Definitely seen a real shift in just terminology and language use, but really the mindsets and being a little open to trying to change those ways. And I think you've mentioned procurement processes. This is a real challenge probably around the world, but it's definitely a real challenge here in Australia. I am quite keen to hear from everyone around this topic to hear about the challenges that fintechs could face when trying to approach new customers in Australia, but how to overcome them and whether we're seeing some changes in that space in your experience. If I jump over to you, David, to start.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually going to pick directly up off the point that Patty made. That I think it is, I agree, really important to start with a proof of concept that's within the area of, I guess, your immediate stakeholder. And on procurement, I've found, while I wouldn't ask it in the first meeting, I've found that I can quite often ask, can you help me understand your procurement process? Are you actually going to be able to approve this if we come to an agreement and you see value in it, or does it have to go 4 layers up the chain? And I found that most of the people that I've worked with, both either the buyer, the financial buyer, or the influencer, they're quite open to answering those questions. Once we've reached a common understanding, or at least a level of trust. That'd be my thoughts.
Sorry to interject, but there's nothing like a common enemy when you're sitting and moaning about procurement with.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're defining the procurement as the common enemy. God, I mean, they really, they cop it hard, those poor people.
It's a necessary, I won't say evil, but it is necessary, and it is that risk mitigation or trying to de-risk, reduce risk for a company, which makes a lot of sense, but it's just got a little out of hand in certain situations where it can take months and months and months. And unfortunately, some of these founders and companies lose all of that time. And if the deal falls through in the end, you can't get that time back. So how do we try to provide some insight for these companies to try to reduce the risk of them losing those months themselves? Ian, what are your thoughts before I jump over to those in the ventures space?
Yeah, oh my God, I've spent so many hours dealing with spreadsheets and legal documents and all of that, Banana Republic stuff. Look, the truth of it is procurement care of our friends at IBM is designed to bring everything down to a common denominator and to compare them at a numerical quantifiable level. So if you're selling something that works in that context, then great, you can go through the procurement process. If you're selling something new, something that's groundbreaking, something that is not going to fit the process, then you might as well almost give up at the beginning, because what will happen is you'll get 3/4 of the way through and the system will say, sorry, I don't know how to digest this, and everything will slow down and it will affect your rate of your win rate, right? My take is to deal with that, you actually need something greater than a sponsor. You need someone who's a champion, and you need someone who's a champion who's influential, not necessarily senior, but influential. And so before you go into the process, you need to identify that person, maybe using the relationship stuff that I was talking about earlier. You need to brief them, and you need to say, hey, look, my problem is I'm selling something that's unique. It can't be broken down very easily by procurement. So when this happens, we're going to hit a problem. The other thing that you can do to get ready for procurement processes is very simple. You can just ask people for the documents they're going to use up front. And by the way, you can assume that all the legal documents say that we own the IP, you have no power, we're going to take all of the control. You can just assume that from the beginning and work from there, just as a little tidbit.
And then the only way is up. I'm making a lot of scars burn through this conversation, aren't I? I'm feeling some of mine as well from the past. Hermia, tell us, is NAB Ventures helping with the procurement process, or is it still having to go through those sorts of
yeah. So I completely agree with Ian. Yeah, I completely agree with Ian. You need a champion, and that is in the form of someone who can just drive it through and keep pushing it through and feel like they own the project themselves. So that really helps. I think the procurement process, it's like it's the same. I would like to think that it's the same at any sort of large corporate. So I don't think there's anything special about the NAB process. But all I can say is with some of the startups we've seen that have been through that, just be patient. Like that's the other side of it. Be patient. It will drive you mental. Just accept it. You will get super frustrated and you just want to call every person you know at the bank to complain about it. But it is, be patient and make sure you have enough cash runway to get through it.
Thank you. Simon, do you have some promising news to say that perhaps X15 isn't as well connected with the procurement processes of CBA?
Yeah, so I think just to react to what was said before, I think things have changed and shifted dramatically over the last couple of years. I think Australia and Australian banks, specifically coming from abroad, had this culture of being quite insular and sometimes arrogant in their innovation model. I think this shifted dramatically with pressure on their cost structure and rise of competition, especially from big tech. And they understood very quickly that while the pace of innovation is much faster outside of their organization than inside, and they need to partner externally. And in order to do this more efficiently, I think lots of banks are created the dedicated innovation units. What we've done at X15, and the reason I have this job, is basically because engaging with startup is so hard. And what we had before was the same procurement and supplier assessment process, whether you're Adobe and a multi-billion-dollar company or a small early stage fintech. So it was not fit for purpose. What we've done at X15, which is not a pure VC, we don't sign checks and hoping for a good exit. We're here to build ventures with external people. The way we do procurement is that we have developed simplified business processes that are fit for purpose for fintech, for startups, but that still meet CBA's risk and security guidelines. And because they meet these guidelines, it means we can put this fintech in front of our customers. Right? So we're trying to cut through the chase and be more straightforward in this approach, but not saying that we nailed it. It's still tricky, but we're getting there.
Thank you. It's also really good insight as to the types of opportunities that venture arms or investment teams like yours are looking at. So thank you for that insight. What we are seeing a bit of in the Australian corporate market is this changing thinking around strategically trying to work out how to best defend and extend the business of today, but also at the same time in parallel how to build more and more capability and action to build the business of tomorrow. So new revenue generating opportunities to continue to grow their own established place in the market. How can companies look to support established players for potentially internal and external facing solutions, and then also look to those opportunities that might be at the edge of financial services specifically? So to your earlier point, Ian, around technology moving into banks, maybe that, non-financial challenger areas, mutuals, etc. What do we think there? David, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think the key thing I'd get at is, and maybe it comes back to an earlier point you made, the market's quite patchy in terms of who's doing what. You know, we had the Royal Commission recently, so some people are doing certain things, and I think it was Simon might have made a point around purple bricks, got themselves in and went back home again. But now we are actually seeing some of the challenges come up. So I actually think it's interesting that we're starting to see a few transformations as players move across industries. You know, even look at where Telstra's going. I know they're not a fintech, but some of the work that Telstra's doing would lend itself quite nicely to what some of these companies might be able to offer, given where Telstra's trying to go in the local market. You know, they're trying to move away from being a telco, or at least they were. They're probably going to buy the broadband back at this rate, but you know, they were trying to get away from being that core telco. So there's a lot of movement in the Australian industry, and so definitely looking outside of the big four is something that you should absolutely do if you're coming into this market, and try and understand what the local market context is, and what are some of the events, the recent events over the last couple of years as it relates to changes in regulation, changes in privatisation, changes in, you know, things like I mentioned, you know, the recent bollocking the banks got, or the big four particularly, and AMP got in the Royal Commission.
Yeah, great. Patrick, you've worked with Telstra before. What do you think about this space?
Yeah, look, so yeah, I'm a great believer that there's a lot of companies just looking to swap industries. I mean, they say innovation happens at the intersection between different industries, etc. And that's not going to change. It's getting more and more. I think so there's a few things. First, I'd caution against you've got to look at these large companies, and some of them have got like the banks as one of their biggest customers, as an example, or 4 of their biggest customers. So some of them don't want to go and sort of tread on everyone else's toes. So you've got to just be careful about that when you're dealing with whoever it is. Australia Post probably service, I don't know if they service the banks that much, but the telcos will be servicing the banks, etc. So just watch from their perspective, because you might have someone who's really excited about it at a more junior level. But when it gets to an executive level, the head of sales, enterprise sales, is going to do their head in and block it. So that's one thing. Having said that, I still think it's very ripe. Like, I think there are opportunities there. The other thing is that you'll find that some non-bank players are just faster and more responsive, actually. Having said that, they've got to get their head around a whole new industry. But yeah, I would also look, I think you've got to look at whether, if your product's externally facing, so you're actually going to go and take customers away from a bank, or you're going to sell to a bank's existing customers, that cannibalization weighs quite heavily on people. So if you're selling that to a large bank, generally, and the X15, Simon, you probably have got a bit more leeway on this, but if it's going to erode the current bank's market, like there's just this fear of someone's P&L is going to get hit. So then you want to actually go for a smaller player that's got enough of a bank balance to help you attack the market, or a player that wants to attack the market quite heavily. But I would check first whether they've actually got the strategic mandate to attack the banks if you're going outside of the banking industry. Smaller banks like the mutuals, etc., are all in a panic for what to do next. But I'm not sure if they've got the money. You'll be able to deal faster with them. You'll get a quick no. Yeah. So.
And it is a good point. And I suppose it raises another question. Do business models then need to be adjusted if that's the case, where it might be cannibalizing their existing products or services? And even if that wasn't the case, do business models from overseas need to be adjusted, or is it about localizing them? So I know you've got some thoughts on this too, Ian.
Oh, so many thoughts about that. Look, the truth is that, fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know what, Australia is known as treasure island for a reason, right? It is a high margin, high revenue, high margin generating sector. And that applies across multiple sectors, actually. And that saying came from the retail sector, but it equally is applicable here in the finance sector. What that means is that there is a bit of an addiction to the either top line or bottom line. And if you're speaking to top line growth, then fantastic, you're in pretty much straight away. If you're speaking to bottom line growth or bottom line savings, for example, if your product is about saving money and therefore you're selling that into a financial organization, that's also good, but it will take you longer to sell it. However, if you're speaking about adding value in a dimension that is not related to top or bottom line growth, you're really going to struggle, because getting that message through is just tricky, right? It's a whole nother way of thinking. And the truth is that in this sector, and particularly in the banking sector, it's very hierarchical thinking, and it doesn't tend to stray too far outside of the norm. So that goes back to having a champion that can help you. It goes to Paddy's point about going to second tiers or more organizations that are more open to looking at those things. And it also means that you might need to think about how you hide your true motivation. What I mean by that is, if you go into one of these organizations and you say, I'm going to sell you this, you're in for a long sales cycle. If you can change your messaging and talk to something they understand, meaning I'm going to help you grow, or I'm going to help you save, and here's how, and here's a reference customer. Once you've proven yourself inside those organizations, it's a totally different story. You will have the ability to talk to them about your true ambition, which is, I want to help, in this value proposition in this completely unrelated dimension. So there's a little bit of active moderation to your own value proposition if it's not speaking directly to top and bottom.
Yeah, really interesting. And so, I've lost my train of thought. I was just about to ask about the different roles that do exist and how you tap into those influencers and decision makers. I mean, that is that's a huge challenge. So how does one go about identifying the right stakeholders to start talking to and working with, and potentially getting that foot in the door to look at a proof of concept or even proof of value? We're seeing proof of value opportunities come up more and more these days with certain organizations that have that appetite. Have you seen some experience in that regard?
Look, absolutely. It goes back to asking. People are actually quite open to telling you the truth. So once you start to ask the question, you'll get the answer. So if you come in with the ability to say, look, I'm learning, can you help me understand how this works and who's who in the zoo, you're like 50% along on the journey. What you should probably bear in mind, though, is, look, if you're selling into a bank, for example, or trying to partner with a bank, Australia is pretty bureaucratic, although the bureaucracy is efficient. So it's a fast bureaucracy, but it's still quite deep. And what that means in the banking sector is there are a lot of levels in these organizations. There are a lot of GMs, there are a lot of directors, there's a lot of divisions. It's mind-numbing, actually. So being able to cut through that is an absolute core skill that you're going to have to develop.
Well, and resilience most definitely is a very good trait to have when you're growing and scaling a new business, for sure. What about these test and learn approaches? I'm sure, Hermia, Simon, you are trying to drive this and push for this to happen more and more within your the banks that you're connected to. How are you trying to shift the culture around that so that organizations can learn from not necessarily experimentation only, but real test and learn, or identifying the capability that these up and coming companies can bring? Because sometimes that capability and is diverse, and it can be applied in many different ways, and not just the one way. To your point, Ian, the one way that you say, hey, I'm selling you this, what sort of capability could you sell, but using one example as that starting point. How do you get that mindset shift happening across your companies?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to this. I think lots of Australian organizations have been struggling for years in terms of innovation, because they've been focusing on POC and pilot and prototype, and there was a lot of innovation theater, and potentially you can look in the direction of CBA at some point, and nothing was getting to scale. Nothing was actually making a difference for their customers ultimately. But from a investor and analyst perspective, you had the innovation tag. I think that's the case for CBA through X15 at the moment, is how we move really, really fast through the experimentation part and start to scale quickly, because there is just so much competition out there. So I think one of the things we're looking at is how we can de-risk very fast a proposition and look for scale ultimately. If you think about it, that's what we've done with Klarna, by bringing number one unicorn in Europe to a whole new market. By having comfort that what they were doing over there was good enough. We didn't go through any pilot or anything. We went straight to full scale. So I would kind of temper this approach to pilot, because it takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, and sometimes you don't really get the outcome that you want.
Yeah, at NAB, we are sort of creating a new model where we do have test environments. So we we're getting better at having startups come in and sort of deploy in a test environment. And we are getting better at that. We're not perfect, but my other sort of thought was that really be focused on what you're selling into the bank. Be really focused on one thing, and it's so much easier to expand once you get in there. So the land and expand strategy works, and it works well. And I've seen it many times where startups come in, they're very focused, and they deliver on one item, and then they expand throughout the bank through other business units, and they do very well that way.
Fantastic. That has a real ring to it. Land and expand. Thank you, Hermia. Andrew, we've got a number of great questions coming through.
So I was about to say, Hermia, land and expand. That's a term I've been hearing from consultants for at least 10 or 15 years. And I didn't think you'd be advocating for that here.
It's true. Yeah.
Here in FinTech. But anyway,
that is the reality.
I've got some great questions. I suppose let's start with an awkward one. Thanks for being here. How do you deal with working with these organisations that can see you're totally into something, but don't want you to yet work with startups? They feel more comfortable with working in-house inefficiently, but don't share their IP. We've come across this often so far in Australia. That's from Diana. Who'd like to take that one? Patty? Oh no, Ian. Go for it, Ian. If you want to,
I clicked the wrong button. I'm technology Luddite. I'm sorry. That is a very common scenario, and I'm sorry that you're going through it. So number one, you just have to hang in there. Is kind of the truth of it. To speed things up, what you can do is you can get their customers to ask them to be more efficient, or to get them to drag it through on your behalf. This is a little bit tricky. But if you're at a situation where you've got a blockage and it's very normal, then the most powerful thing you can do is to get the organization that you're targeting to hear from the beneficiaries, whether they're the end users or their customers. So employ a strategy of going out and seeing whether you have relationships and getting those people to talk to that organization. Interestingly enough, if you do that and you tell them what your motivation is, again, I need your help, because generally they will be very receptive to helping you. Even if they don't want to talk to their customer, they will often point you to somebody who might be willing to do that. So there's a real theme here from me, which is to articulate what you want, to say it clearly, and to ask for help. And if you do that, then you'll get some great results.
Excellent. Anyone else on that one before I move on to the next question? No?
I suppose if I could just respond,
Yeah,
not as moderator, but I think also being able to articulate those benefits and be very clear as to your understanding of that organization and how what you can bring is going to make a difference. Trying to shift the focus on startup away from oh, you know, do I want to work with a startup? It's just not appealing, or it's not something that has the experience yet in that organization. Just trying to get those key points of information across as to how you might be providing a solution that might be better, faster, cheaper, more customer centric and customer focused, etc.
I can say from experience, and I've interviewed and lunched and dined with many CEOs of Australia's big four banks, there's no doubt that they really do very much look across the road to the other big four bank before they look at other parts of the market. I think that might be changing, but there's still I think a fair bit of, you know, it's the big four and then everyone else. This question goes to that question, that point. It's from Adrian Falvey. Does partnering with a smaller bank initially outside the big four limit opportunities with larger banks downstream, or does it help? Who'd like to take that?
Yeah, well, I think Hermia or myself are well positioned to take this. I'm trying to think through a case that happened like this, and I don't really have any coming to mind. I think at least at CBS for X15, I think banks like to have exclusivity quite early on, and I will be even surprised that like this tier 2 bank is not negotiating exclusivity at the beginning. So just be mindful who you're partnering with first, because you may have lots of clauses in terms of your investment, who you can talk to, and so on. We know that we like to have exclusivity. The pure reason for that is that you drive more strategic value from your investment or from your partnership. So again, it depends on the type of proposition. Is this a strategic partnership, or is this a simple vendor agreement? If it's a vendor agreement, actually it's de-risking the investment for a big bank. You go tier 2, you go tier 1, it makes sense. For a strategic partnership, it's a bit different, because a bank will try to differentiate themselves to other big four and other banks. So I would say it depends on the type of engagement.
Yeah, I agree. I think it really does depend on the proposition. There are definitely times where exclusivity is important, but there are times also where there is a bit of a network effect depending on the product, and it is great to have other banks using it, and it makes the sort of product and the company better. So one example is one of the companies we've invested in called Slip. We were the first institutional investor, and then the other sort of majors came on board as well. And we acknowledge the fact that the more banks that are using, you know, this product or take this product on board, the better the product will be and better for its customers.
Excellent. Now, there's another question from Mark. Excellent content on how to sell in Australia. Thank you. However, are there any parts of the industry actively searching for innovation solutions? And if so, how do overseas firms best tap into this research? Paddy, you might be well positioned to answer that question, possibly.
So, I'm not 100% sure what the innovation solutions is quite a broad thing. So I think, we're talking earlier about innovation theatre. So everyone went and bought a book on lean startup and hauled out a business model canvas, had a fight over whether it's a lean canvas is better than a business model canvas, bought post-it notes, and then did nothing for a year or 2 years of substance. And so they were pretty much getting desperate to get shit out the door into customers' hand and improve a return. And so I think from an innovation consultancy perspective, we've pivoted somewhat to actually delivering turnkey solutions for our customers, because they're just like, let's cut the crap, get a team that's formed and that can deliver quickly and get something into market. So there is certainly a need for innovation solutions. As I think Ian said, the top 100 companies are all doing something in this space. I think the one problem with innovation at the moment is that you know, it's not like you've gone to law school and you've then gone and done something at a top law firm or whatever the case is, and then you get hired. So the barriers to entry are pretty low. And a lot of people have sort of held themselves out to being able to go and change the world. Some are successful, some aren't. So I think if you've got a really strong track record, depending on what the solution is, if it's really going to turn the needle for someone, do it. If it's a new methodology, what I found is innovation teams get so caught up on their ways of work that good luck trying to change that. So if you can deliver quick results, I'm sure there's a market for it, but don't bring post-it notes. Yeah. Simon and Hermia, you probably know much more about that than I would. But, yeah.
I've heard the biggest winner out of the whole innovation world is 3M.
Yeah,
Make
absolutely.
those post-it notes. Yeah.
Andrew, if I could just add to that, I think that Mark's question did say innovative solutions. So I think
sorry.
No, that's all right. I think there was a little bit of miscommunication there, but one thing that we do see is, you know, the likes of the venture arms to large financial services organizations. There are different focus areas of some corporates which exist solely for trying to attract the type of talent and capabilities that startups are offering. So I would suggest seeking those out, but also if I can spruik the likes of my company, the company I work for, Stone and Chalk, you know, we have corporate partners, and there are many companies who have corporate partners, and what we do is actually try to run some reverse pitch events where you actually get those problems that these large organizations are looking to solve, and then go out and scout for those solutions through our own community of startups and scale-ups, but even more broadly and internationally as well. So there are avenues like that to go down as well.
Mm.
Gemma, can I make a point on this?
Please.
I think it's a really important, this whole thing is probably the crux of the hour, in my view. Look, the truth is that people have been selling things into the financial sector in the country since it was, you know, founded, right? I mean, this is not new. So for me, the best way of doing it is finding a business owner and making sure that you can sell something to that business owner. Personally, I actually avoid the venture arms of the organizations, with the greatest respect to Hermia and Simon, because I have found that if you are able to identify a business owner inside an organization and you're able to articulate what you do to them, they will drag you through as a sale, irrespective of the kind of the innovation agenda that organization has, because they are self-interested in doing so. So, you know, there is lots of opportunity. It is not new. And if you do have an innovative solution, don't think that you've got one angle into these organizations. You have got every single GM and director in these organizations that you can go and talk to. Every single one of them is self-interested. So go out and find someone. And Gemma, I would absolutely echo your kind of position in the industry, because you can help direct traffic to an extent in that regard.
And can I also
quickly,
sorry, Ed, go on. Yes.
Sorry, just to add to that. So yeah, agreed. There's definitely the ways through the business owner and the business units. The thing about the venture arm is when we do make an investment, we really do work with the our portfolio companies to drive them into the bank, and that's the sort of added value. It's a win-win for obviously the venture fund as well as the portfolio company if we can make that relationship work and get them through the bank. So that's the sort of, I guess, the added value of us investing in a company, in addition to just being a customer of the company.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it.
Sorry, if I can have a re-go.
Yes, please.
Just quickly there on the right topic this time. So look, I mean, I think if it's something that's just like if your innovation is established, it's proven, etc., and it's quite close to the core, you've probably got a better chance of finding who's responsible for retail, this area. And I agree 100% is get them to really drive it for you, because a lot of management can override, like they can ask for exemptions, etc., etc. If it's more fluffy, I think it's really important. When I say fluffy, it's like it doesn't fit in a box neatly. Then you're in a bit of trouble. So I think LA, you might be led on by someone. You might knock on someone's door and they're interested, but it's not really in their area, and then it might get involved in a bit of a turf war. So if you look at those kind of things, most of those statistically are nearly captain's calls. And so where you get someone who's above all of the different areas hierarchically, and they sort of push it down and lead it, that's quite difficult. So that's why I strongly advocate getting an advisory board member on board. I mean, when I was in Australia, I got someone on day 3, and they really helped open stuff up. And then I moved out of fintech into health insurance. I knew no one in health insurance. And we went and hired the ex-minister of health, the Honorable Dr. Michael Wooldridge. And he knew every CEO on the planet. So I had I think there were 36 health funds, 36 meetings set up. And that de-risked it for them. It helped us get in front of the right people. But you've got to have the right story, the right product. So don't kid yourself. But yeah, so I think the more ambitious and innovative it is, the more I'd advocate for that.
Yeah, I think, and I've sold a bit into banks myself, I think Hermia makes a good point that if you're going to deal with the smaller mutuals, and they are much easier to get into, and particularly if you get to talk to someone fairly senior at the smaller mutuals who've got genuine customer needs, and they also need to keep scale and keep efficiency because they're getting terribly squeezed. They've got that pain and blood on the floor that Paddy talks about. Then you're going to get a quicker entry. But once you're in there, or you're making inroads, you're going to need to spend a lot more time holding the hand of that mutual, because they just don't have the bandwidth and the skill sets to necessarily be able to do a lot of the work that as a customer you're going to need from them. So just keep that in mind as well. I think that's an important point that Hermia makes. Another question, which is a really good one, leads beautifully on to what we've just been talking about from anonymous attendee. Welcome, anonymous attendee. We can't just pop across to Australia now and start building these relationships or putting our A-team on the ground, as Paddy has suggested. In the current climate, would working with a potential alliance partner with existing relationships and cut through be the best approach, as Paddy suggested? So who else would like to talk about that? Gemma, you must have seen and heard this all the time. Would that be right?
Yeah, look, I mean, leveraging relationships. We've talked a lot about that today, this morning, this evening. It is really worthwhile leveraging those relationships in either different organizations or within the same industry, or even similar industries. And to your point, Paddy, CEOs talk to CEOs, heads of technology, CIOs talked with CIOs. Those forums do exist, and leveraging off of different relationships like that can be very helpful, and creating that alliance as a partner. It also goes to one of those questions earlier around the appetite to work with a startup, and whether if that doesn't exist, and then you have an alliance partner who has worked with you or another startup, that definitely strengthens your story and your cause, and the building that compelling case as to why your solution should be brought on board, or at least tried and trialed, to see whether or not it could be utilized and expanded upon.
Could I add to that?
Yep.
I think the
Please,
answer to my mind is categorically yes, right? I mean, so there's big consulting companies that will happily, be your local arm of a startup if they see value in it, albeit be careful the pound of flesh that they might take. And then there's also companies who, it's their bread and butter. So without spruiking what I'm doing at the moment, one of my colleagues, he spent the last almost 30 years doing exactly that, acting as the local sales and relationship arm for companies out of the US, right? So, he had a very technology focus. So there's absolutely companies that are focused on doing that. We recognize that we're 10,000 miles from either the US or the UK. So even if you did want to hop on a flight, it's a long way. So it's absolutely it's absolutely the way to get things done. There are people down here who that's their bread and butter. That's what they've been doing for 10, 20, 30 years. So the answer is absolutely yes, in my opinion.
Excellent. I think another good point's been made is that tomorrow's session is about research. Tomorrow's session is about understanding the ecosystems and developing your approach. So we're actually going to spend a lot of time on this tomorrow, which should be very helpful for all of our participants. And so just keep that in mind, participants. Now, I'm wondering if we got any more questions from the floor. I think what we might do is start wrapping up the session, because I think we're due to be finishing fairly shortly. Ian, you've been very honest with us in this session, which is exactly what you promised you would be. And I think our participants, our attendees would really appreciate that, because as I said throughout all of last week, this virtual market mission is very much about risk management and reducing the exposure, the risk exposure, reducing the costs and reducing time wasted by going down rabbit holes and also chasing a dream that just may not be a reality. What's sort of the last tip or two that you might give our attendees before we wrap it up from you?
Yeah, okay. So, okay, first tip, get a dollar out of your target. And what I mean by that is get a purchase order from them. It doesn't need to be much. It could be $10, it could be $1, but get a purchase order out of them. Don't just go through the process of, you know, proof of concept and then procurement process, then. If they issue you a purchase order, they will have made an action to go and get that approved in their system, and you are on the right track. If you're not getting a purchase order, then be very, very worried. Second tip, particularly from banks, if you're asked for a white label, think very hard about doing that. You can almost translate that as, we think we can replace you down the track, or we think we can build it ourselves. So stand by your brand. When they say we want white label, say not so keen on that. I mean, think about it, but I would do that. And even better, get ahead and say, before you've even had the question asked, well, we just don't do white label, we need our brand out there. And then maybe just finally, have some fun. You know, have some fun, push people, you know, and see where you land. It's not all bad. It's just a different market. So you need to work out how to navigate the market and find out who's who in the zoo. And once you've worked that out, all of a sudden the doors just fly open.
Excellent. David, I'm going to ask you the same question. What are your one or two tips for our audience that Ian hasn't already parted with us today?
Yeah, I think, I mean, Ian said it earlier, I think being honest, asking for help is key. You know, reciprocity is really important here. And I think if, you know, if you help out and be genuinely helpful and ask questions, that would be one of my key tips. What's the other one I would think of? I think it is, I always come back to, I need to make sure that I understand, I need to walk a mile in my customer or my partner's shoes. So I always try to understand the people I'm working with, what are their actual motivations? And it comes back to the point I made earlier around making sure that you need to understand what's the actual need, not what's the ask. So that would be probably ask questions, be honest, understand the need, not the ask.
Yep. Simon, I might go to you now. What do you want to hear when you're being approached by fintechs in your particular situation there?
Yeah, I think, you know, most of the time you're going to know more than people at the bank itself. So, you know, don't be afraid to educate people. That's one thing. The second thing is, you know, it's all about what is a burning platform for the bank, and what are you solving for them, not necessarily your features or your technicalities. So try to understand the context and what are they afraid of. Is it disintermediation? Is it commoditization? And so on. And I think the last, I think, like, you know, piece of advice I'd like to leave with everybody here is, like, never ascribe to bad intents for large banks. Everybody wants to do well. We're all keen to bring new solutions to our customers, or or streamline our processes through technology. If it's slow, it's because it's a very large organization. We talk about NAB 30,000, CBA 50,000. There is just a natural slowness to the organization. We're not doing this on purpose. There is no brain rape or whatever. We're just trying to do it, and there are a few processes. So no bad intent, and get a bit of trust also here.
I remember a lunch I chaired with our Leaders Lecture Series with David Whiting, who was your old CIO there at CBA, and he said, and it was a room full of technologists. I think it might have been even an AAA event, and a technology company asked him, what's the one thing you want to hear from a technology firm when it's coming to talk to you? And he said, well, there's one clear thing. We're trying to escape legacy, and I suspect you're still trying to do that, Simon. And that is, if the technology company can say, I can remove 3 or 4 pieces of technology with my one, you've got our attention straight away. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think if it's about more like this space around streamlining information processes and data processes, which is more about enablers, I think that's definitely the case. When we're looking at customer proposition, it's more how we offer something that other banks just don't have, right?
Excellent. Yep. Hermia, same question to you. What do you like to hear?
Yeah, always open to a conversation, definitely, and hearing new ideas. And if there is a way, and it's also obviously part of my role, but if there is a way I can help you and introduce you to the right people at the company, or even in the broader venture community or in other corporates or whatnot, like definitely open to it and happy to help. So I think just be, if Australia is your focus market, then go for it, be persistent, and make yourselves available at, in our time zone. So for a conversation.
Excellent. Paddy, you've done a lot of this and you've had a lot of fun doing it. And Ian's tip, you've had a lot of fun doing it. He's got a fun park in his backyard, everyone. You should know that. He literally has a fun park.
Yeah. So firstly, the esteemed panel has covered a lot of what I would have said, I think. But yeah, in terms of building trust, I love what Ian mentioned about getting some money out of them. Someone once told me, as big as the turnstiles are at the banks to get into them, it's probably as hard to get out of them once you are in. So yeah, so just get behind them by hook or by crook. So that's a good piece of advice, I think. And also, sorry, if I might just having those open discussions, people really want to help you navigate, and so ask the questions and be honest with them and open. I mean, they don't want to make you feel bad. So the culture here is pretty much people won't go, no, this is a shitty idea on day one. They might drag you along out of courtesy, not out of malice. And so like ask the right questions and listen up for the answers. But what I'd like to leave on, that's, there's a company, Airbus as an organization. I saw their head of innovation once talking and saying, on an Airbus, there's like 2 million moving parts or whatever the case is. So if you go, show me an innovation, like you're going to have like 8 million different people in your queue, each trying to show you something. And that's really hard for people to sift through what's useful and what's not useful. And so what he would say is, if it's going to save time on the ground or save fuel, I'm going to give you a free kick to trial it out because it's really important to me. So I think find what's really, really important for your customers. Ask them what those sort of big beacons are that they're aiming towards and what's going to get that free kick. And focus on those customers, because the rest you're going to have to sort of try and explain why this is going to be prioritized above everything else. And then the other thing, sorry, I'm going on to 8 things. Yeah, it's just from a behavioral economics perspective, you've got to look at the gains. Like you're selling them something that's going to give them a gain, but the pain's loom larger than gains. And so de-risk stuff for them. Just put yourself in the shoes. You're from overseas, whatever. How do you de-risk it for people, whether that's partnering, whatever the case is? Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Paddy. Gemma, fantastic panel. Any parting comments before we wrap this up from your expertise and perspective?
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, everyone. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I suppose the one real key thing that I see very much in my role and my experience is that startups and corporates speak very different languages. And it's frustrating that is the case, but it's about trying to get your startup corporate ready and trying to support and encourage corporates to become startup ready so that collaboration and that partnership can actually come to life. And it's something that I'm not only passionate about, but work really hard to try to help with as well. What I would say in terms of languages as well, looking at one market like the UK to Australia, they are different, but it's a slight dialect difference. It's not a completely different language. So let's utilize the common grounds that we have. And I would highly recommend tapping into and growing your own network in Australia. To Patty's point earlier, board advisors is fantastic, but think about also perhaps a mentor, someone from the industry, someone from the well-established space, the corporate space, but also equally other founders who have been in this area before and they've had these conversations and they've probably got some of the same scars that you don't want to get. So definitely tap into building those relationships and put a lot of time and investment into them, because it will probably save you a lot of pain and time down the track.
Yeah, excellent advice. So look, for those of you that are watching that want to get in contact with any of our speakers here, Liz Wood is the key contact point there at Newfound. She's been remarkably good at getting you together for these sessions over the last 2 weeks. So I'd suggest you go through Liz Wood. For someone that's spoken to the most senior people at the banks, I have with over 700 events and lunches and dinners and all sorts of things, but also been in sales for 30 years. I can tell you that, and it's been said 100 times today, selling's not telling, it's actually about asking. That's what you're doing. You're asking what they want, you're asking why they want it, and then you're saying, look, I think I can deliver that. That's really, to me, the most simple thing is it's not telling, it's actually asking. So I hope you learn a lot from that session. I really enjoyed that today. I'd like to thank Gemma and all the panel members for being available today for well over an hour. It's been fantastic information, great insights. Thank you very much, panel members, indeed. Thank you. Big round of applause to you, indeed. Big round of applause. With that, we're going to wrap up this session now. We're going to remind you that it's all about research tomorrow. So thank you so much, and I look forward to speaking to you tomorrow. Indeed, at 5 o'clock Sydney time, or I think it's 8 o'clock UK time. Enjoy and take care today. Bye-bye.